When questioned about France's decision to support Palestinian statehood, Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canada remains firm in advocating for a two-state solution.
Canadians online are expressing outrage after the EU and the US signed a trade deal leaving Canada with some of the highest global tariff rates with its closest neighbor.
A whistleblower from the Longest Ballot Committee claims he was allegedly duped by the group. Hello Canada, it's Tuesday, July 29th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Cosmin, Dzsurdzsa.
And I'm Geoff Knight.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Prime Minister Mark Carney said his government is committed to a two-state solution in Gaza and the West Bank that, quote, does not include Hamas. Speaking to reporters Monday in Prince County, PEI, Carney responded to France's bid to recognize Palestinian statehood by saying Canada would back a two-state solution. Carney said, quote, we've always supported it, and we continue to support a two-state solution with a free and viable Palestine living in peace and security alongside Israel. We will work with the international community towards a ceasefire and a two-state solution that meets those criteria. Carney said those criteria do not include any future role for Hamas.
We will work with the international community, work with others, to move towards a situation of a ceasefire, a two-state solution that meets those criteria that I just mentioned, that does not include Hamas in any role in a future Palestinian state.
As recently as May, Hamas has put out official statements thanking the Carney government for condemning Israel. In his statement, Mark Carney added, quote, we will take steps that advance those fundamental principles at the appropriate time. So just to elaborate on that one point from the article, Hamas and Hamas leadership have actually extended quite a few courtesies and sympathies to not only the Carney government, but former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as well. The most recent of which was in May when the Hamas leadership put out a message thanking Canada specifically, the United Kingdom and France for putting out a statement on the conflict, which it viewed as a favorable statement towards their cause. But with regard to Carney's latest statements on the Middle Eastern conflict, Geoff, how are Canadians reacting to this?
Yeah, Cosmin, reactions from Canadians are mixed, with some expressing support for Carney's stance on a two-state solution, while others criticize it as insufficient or biased. Jewish Canadian agencies, including B'nai B'rith Canada, are largely unhappy, arguing Carney's focus on Israel's role in Gaza overlooks Hamas's obstruction of aid and commitment to extremism. They've called Carney's comments dangerous, suggesting they fuel anti-Semitism by ignoring Hamas's actions, as seen in their recent statements. France's recent recognition of Palestinian statehood at the UN has intensified global pressure, influencing Carney's remarks during his Prince Edward Island press conference. Some Canadians on X have accused Carney of anti-Semitism, linking his position to a perceived lack of defense for Jewish communities facing pro-Hamas sentiment. Others defend Carney, pointing to his call for a ceasefire and hostage release as a balanced approach, though this has not swayed critics. The Hamas statement thanking Carney's government for condemning Israel has fueled debates about his administration's consistency, adding tension to Canadian public discourse. Canadians are frustrated after the United States and the European Union signed a major trade deal, leaving Canada with some of the highest tariffs in the world, all this while other countries are securing favorable agreements with the US. The deal has struck a particular nerve across social media, with reactions ranging from disbelief to outrage. Political commentary YouTuber Mr. Sunshine Baby said, quote, it's almost as if the attempt to stand up to Trump doesn't actually work. Imagine if Canada actually tried to work with Trump on a deal that's more beneficial to them, but gets our foot in the door better than we have now. Former independent MP Kevin Wong highlighted that both Japan and the European Union have negotiated down to 15% tariffs with the United States. Conversely, Canada has 25% tariffs on all non-CUSMA compliant goods, which is set to increase to 35% on August 1st and 50% on aluminum and steel. Canada and the US are currently undergoing negotiations, and a trade deal has yet to be finalized. The European Union negotiated a tariff agreement with the US on Sunday. Every country in the EU agreed to zero tariffs on US goods, while the US will tax EU products at 15%. Political commentator Mark Nixon said, quote, "Europe bent the knee. Canada didn't even get a seat at the table. Canada just got embarrassed." So, Cosmin, it's almost like we can do a weekly check-in on how Elbows Up is going in Canada. What message are Canadians getting from this new deal between the EU and the US?
Well, look, Geoff, I suspect a lot of Canadians, even those who voted for Mark Carney and the Liberals, are watching this play out and wondering what exactly this elbows up plan was supposed to achieve. The whole idea Carney pitched from the get-go, and it's a bad idea, was to lean more on the EU so we wouldn't have to rely so much on the United States. We all know Carney is super sympathetic to Europe. He calls himself a European. But now we have the EU who just landed a better deal with the US. They understand that the way forward is impossible without a positive trade relationship with the United States. I mean, it's the biggest economy in the world, while we're stuck with skyrocketing tariffs here in Canada. And instead of fixing that relationship, Carney's going around signing security deals with Europe, making signals about, a EU-Canada relationship. He had the EU-Canada summit, all at the same time that Europe is moving closer to the United States. How does that make sense when even Europe knows we can't go anywhere and we can't compete globally without staying on good terms with the US? A whistleblower allegedly involved with the Longest Ballot Committee has come forward saying he now feels, quote, duped and misled by the organization after he had agreed to run as a candidate in the 2024 Toronto-St. Paul's by-election. The Longest Ballot group is known for nominating as many candidates as possible in ridings as a form of protest. The alleged anonymous whistleblower told independent media outlet Northern Perspective that he initially joined the Longest Ballot cause because he took issue with Canada's first-past-the-post electoral system. The man was informed that all he was obligated to do to participate was provide his name as a candidate and that the Longest Ballot Committee would do the rest, including, quote, appointing a CFO, collecting the required nomination signatures, and filing the paperwork. The whistleblower submitted his candidate information for the Toronto-St. Paul's riding only 3 days before the election deadline. Ryan Davies, the founder of Northern Perspective, told True North, quote, Northern Perspective has obtained internal emails, text messages, and first-hand testimony from a whistleblower who ran on the Longest Ballot. The evidence we've reviewed raises serious concerns, including what appear to be blank candidate fields on nomination forms, coordinated activity resembling an unregistered political party, and practices that could potentially constitute forgery or misrepresentation/impersonation under the Canada Elections Act. Furthermore, the whistleblower confirmed to Northern Perspective that he did not personally sign or review his final nomination paperwork before it was submitted. While he offered to participate as a candidate in the riding of Toronto-St. Paul's during the last election, he was not a resident of the area. He said, quote, let's face it, I'm not from St. Paul's. I'm hundreds of miles away. I don't know anything about St. Paul's. Candidates are not legally required to live in a riding in order to run for election. The whistleblower went on to say that he regretted his involvement with the organization. He said, quote, I think I was duped, noting that the committee attempted to recruit him again in 2025 on the pretense that they were going to run a number of candidates in Liberal leader Mark Carney's riding. He said, quote, then they wanted me to go against, they said, Mark Carney. Then they tried to trick me. Basically, it was actually Pierre Poilievre's riding. They never did Mark Carney's riding this past election. Geoff, the Battle River Crowfoot by-election is coming up. It's just around the corner in August, and Pierre Poilievre is running in that by-election with the hopes that he regains his seat in the House of Commons. So a lot of attention has been paid to this Longest Ballot Committee. And right now, as the numbers say, they're running over 200 candidates in that by-election. Now, this story came out recently, just in the past few days. What does this reveal about the group to Canadians and their methods?
Yeah, Cosmin, this whistleblower's account reveals to Canadians that the Longest Ballot Committee may have engaged in some pretty deceptive practices, which raises questions about the legitimacy of its so-called protest methods. Their claim of being duped and misled, coupled with the blank nomination forms you mentioned, suggests that the group prioritizes disruption over genuine electoral reform advocacy. The revelation that the whistleblower, who was a non-resident of Toronto St. Paul's, was recruited without even reviewing paperwork highlights a lack of transparency and accountability within the organization. The attempt to redirect the whistleblower to target Pierre Poilievre's riding instead of Mark Carney's indicates a possible strategic focus on conservative candidates, undermining the group's stated goal of protesting the first-past-the-post system. So Canadians may interpret this as evidence that the group's actions are more about political snubbing, obviously against conservatives, than a principled stand for electoral reform, especially given the coordinated activity resembling an unregistered party. Public reaction, as seen in media like Northern Perspective and on True North, leans closer to skepticism, with some viewing this as a scandal that exposes the group's methods as potentially illegal under the Canada Elections Act.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.